I am your brother in Christ, and welcome back. We are back at long last. It's been a while, and we have a topic today to cover, which should be rather interesting for as long as this video remains on YouTube. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we go. So, talking about masks, vaccine, COVID, and the new normal they are pushing. Okay, well, first of all, we'll be talking about how deadly COVID-19 actually is by breaking down just the simple fact of how we understand how lethal a virus is. When someone says that, well, it's lethality is 6%. It's fatality is 6%. Does that mean that out of 100 people, 6% are guaranteed to die? So 6 people out of 100 are guaranteed to die? What does that actually mean? After that, we're going to look at mask mandates, what's going on with that, vaccine mandates, and what is going on with this vaccine passport. So we'll dive in and break that down, as well as masks. Are they actually good for you? There's some interesting studies that have come out that I rather address that will be rather interesting. First of all, hey, DeCobra, welcome. It's good to see you again. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Was it yesterday we talked? I don't know. Days are starting to rush into one. So let's start off with how deadly is COVID? If you do a Google search on the Black Death, you get the death rate for the Black Death very easily. COVID, you don't. In fact, I had a very hard time actually getting a solid number, which is very interesting because at the beginning of this, I was covering it every day. I was showing how it spread. I was very strict on following not just the CDC guidelines or anything like that, definitely early on last year, but we were like, when they said lockdown for 2 weeks, my family locked down for 2 weeks. Everyone took the time off work. Everyone wore masks whenever we left. We didn't even leave for at least 2 weeks, except for one person that went out to the grocery store, grab groceries, come back, and then everything was bleached down. So I was out there pouring bleach and wiping all the containers down because originally we believed that it could spread on any surface for days, which didn't end up being true. But at least at the point that we believed that it was, and even when we went out at the beginning, we're wearing masks, I wore gloves, we actually took serious precautions. Yeah, that was then. And there's been some interesting studies since then. So, whenever someone says that, well, the Black Death killed 33% of the European population. It had a death rate of 50%. So, people ask, okay, what does that actually mean? Because it didn't kill 50% of the European population. It killed 33%. Well, the death rate itself is actually a percentage of if I were to get it, if I would live. For example, if I were to get the Black Death in Europe during the time period, it would be a flip of the coin if I lived or died. And for each person who got it, it would be another flip of the coin. It's always be a 50-50 chance. So in the same way, when we had the Spanish flu come through, there was, I think it was a 3%, don't quote me on that one, death rate. So you had a 3% rate of dying, but that was depending upon your age because it hit the younger ages much worse than did the older ages, which is kind of the reverse that we're seeing with COVID. And I'll get into the numbers from the CDC website. So, hey, YouTube, I've got my references. They're in the description. They're well documented. So it's not my fault. It's the CDC. So take your problems up with them, although you'll probably just delete the video, and I'm not even sure this will finish streaming. But we will find out now, won't we? So let's go ahead and look at the CDC numbers. Now, just for kicks and giggles, I have the CDC numbers up here. Let me put myself back up there. There we go. Look at me. Okay, fantastic. So we've got trial, we've got age groups. This is all from the United States. So this is all sexes. It does break down male and female. It does a lot more breakdown than what I'm going to go into. I'm just looking at the ages. It would be interesting to see the breakdowns, but I didn't do the numbers for those. So I took these numbers and applied them to my handy dandy sheet here. So we've got under age 1, we've got total deaths, we've got COVID deaths, and the percentage of total deaths that were related to COVID. Now, this was from the time frame of beginning of last year to, I think, the beginning of this month. But it's whatever was on the CDC website. It was weird. It wasn't a direct year. It was a year plus time. So then we have pneumonia deaths. Their percentage of total deaths, as we see in the number there. And then the difference between the two, that is rather interesting. So this takes out the spread. This takes out a lot of different factors because we're just looking at the total deaths in a time frame of an entire year. And we're comparing COVID to pneumonia. And again, this is based off of the CDC's website right here. And again, this is pneumonia deaths right here. So we're taking a look at that compared to COVID deaths. So if you are a child under the age of 1, so far there have only been 59 deaths from COVID. That's actually an incredibly low number. It kind of makes sense. We know that COVID does not hit the young as hard as it's hit the older generations. So that is, according to all the deaths from the CDC last year, and I'm assuming that these are, although the CDC didn't define necessarily what total deaths meant, I'm assuming that total deaths is basically all ailments. There were 22,626 deaths for a child under the age of 1, and we have 59 of those because of COVID. Now, if we look at pneumonia is for this age group under 1. I'm being very clear here. According to the CDC, pneumonia is much more deadly than COVID. Actually, well over 4 times more deadly for a child under the age of 1. In fact, if you're looking at this, pneumonia is much more scarier for a parent that has a child under the age of 1, that I soon shall be again. So the difference between the percentage rate is about 0.83% between the two. Of course, I'm getting updates on our Discord as we're doing because I didn't exit Discord. Of course, not the most brilliant. You should exit all things before starting streams because then they start popping up left and right. Okay. So again, we're seeing that's quite a large difference between those two. Now, between 1 and 4 years old, we're seeing 31 deaths, so even less than under 1 year, which kind of makes sense because under 1 year, you don't have their immune system still developing, so they might be open to more of an attack. Between 1 and 4 years, we're seeing only 31 deaths. Again, we're seeing a very small percentage, 0.76% of the total deaths of this time period were because of COVID in this age group. And again, pneumonia comes in and clocks in much higher. In fact, quite a bit higher as far as its amount of deaths. So scanning down through this, I'm not going to drag it out too long. We see that until you get really, now the CDC does some weird stuff with their numbers. I don't know why they do this. right here, this line here, which is 0 to 17. So all kids, we're going to go ahead and skip that. If you go up here to when you're 30 is where you really start seeing that pneumonia is less deadly than COVID. So COVID is more deadly in this age bracket. Now, again, that difference, looking at the difference of 0.08% difference between the two, that's still, the difference between those two is still less than the difference between pneumonia and COVID back for anyone under 1 year. But that's where we start seeing this major ramp up and where COVID really starts coming into its own with a much higher percentage of the death toll last year. Now, still, I'm shocked by these numbers, but we'll go ahead and go on through. So as we go down, the older and older you get, the higher and higher it goes. So total deaths last year for someone between the ages of 75 and 84, we're seeing 14.74% of those deaths last year were due to COVID in the United States. As far as a plague goes, though, that's kind of weak, actually. Going back through looking at the death rates for the first year, definitely Black Death blew this out of the water. There's just no comparison. The Spanish flu, still no comparison. The death percentage was way higher in the first year. So we're really not seeing that. And even compared to pneumonia, we're only seeing a difference of 1.81%. I mean, that's still very small between those two diseases, basically. And how many of us have had walking pneumonia of some sort or pneumonia of some sort? Breaking it down, I mean, walking pneumonia is the most common, so at least the one that gets least detected, according to the CDC. So now 85 years and older, so you're getting to the very old because they just clump everyone into this. We're seeing 13.33% for COVID as far as the total percentage of death last year, and pneumonia is clocking in at 10.54%. So if we look at the totals, there's really, again, this is where I guess our media has really done a huge disservice to us, and really is really surprising between the death rates here. We've had pneumonia for a very long time, very, very, very long time, and we have never shut down our economy. We've never required masks. We never required any of these extreme measures that we've taken. Again, this is looking hindsight. Even my actions that I took, I'm not seeing justification for that. Again, we're looking at a difference as far as the deaths go between pneumonia and COVID over all ages in the United States, according to the CDC, of 1.76%. That's teeny tiny. It's actually very small between the two. So that's very, see, that's where seeing it in comparison to another virus, another disease is critical, because we treat pneumonia. And if pneumonia over all ages, COVID is just 1.76% more deadly. That's even with its increased spread rate, because it doesn't matter between these two, because we're just looking at the absolute deaths from this study. So spread rate's actually even taken out of this. Actually, if it was as virulent as the social media would let you know, as far as mainstream media would let you know, or at least hope that you believe, I would expect to see that at least 35-50% of the total deaths last year, according to the CDC, would be COVID, and we're not seeing that. In fact, we're seeing very little, and quite a few of those were at the very beginning of this. So we've definitely seen a tapering down as if COVID is on its way out. So some of the reactions that we've done, some of the things that we have chosen to do and have been forced into doing, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of those. So masking, wearing your mask. Does that even work? I mean, seriously, does that even work? Is it efficient? Many studies are split on it. A lot of impartial studies, though, do show, and again, the links are in the description below, that no, actually, there hasn't been. In fact, the surgical masks that you see or the cloth masks are ineffective. In fact, many of them find that they make COVID worse because basically you're just rebreathing in. If you already have COVID-19, you're just rebreathing in the virus that you're supposed to be expelling from your body. So there have been studies that show that, that is actually worse. On top of that, we've seen harmful effects due to the stuff that your body is believing it's sending out. So naturally, when we breathe, we're exhaling some rather nasty chemicals. We exhale CO2, we exhale N2 and O2. Normally, they leave the body and are expelled, and we're perfectly fine. Unfortunately, with the masks on, a lot of these cloth masks in particular that many people are wearing, we are seeing that they get trapped within that and start mixing together, creating HNO3, H2CO3, and NO2. I'm not chemistry, but that's what the studies have said. I'm no chemistry major. But in addition, gator necks don't help anything at all. In fact, they're worse over all the studies. If you wear a gator mask, there's no evidence that that makes anything better. In fact, you're much better off just not wearing it at all. I did not find a single study that said those gator neck things are even working at all. So even if you believe that you want to wear masks, again, we live in America, so you should be able to wear masks wherever you want if that's what you feel is necessary. Okay, fine. But don't kid yourselves and make sure you know what the risks are. So on top of that, those masks that you use, the cloth masks, the gator necks, the bandanas you use, whatever we use to wash, and again, counts on what you're actually using, what chemicals you're using on those masks, you are then breathing back into your body. And those chemicals you use for washing your clothes aren't really rated for something that you want to be breathing through. Definitely mixing with the chemicals that we've listed above. So those could have nasty effects. In fact, we're seeing some of those effects. We're seeing that masks have been found to, in some studies, to cause inflammation of the lungs and stomach, vomiting, diarrhea, eye infections. There's been some relation to diabetes, shortness of breath, kidney failure, liver malfunction, and other serious infection of the digestive organs, and a little thing called lung cancer. That's just a little thing on the side. That's normally hidden at the bottom of the list. If science doesn't back it, and we're really seeing two different forms, and we need to evaluate, because again, we're looking at something that is only, according to the CDC, last year only killed a little over 1.6% more people in the United States than pneumonia did. then what's the real reason behind this? It seems to me, definitely watching the news, watching mainstream media, it's fear and control. It comes back to inciting fear, driving ratings, and an effect of that is being able to control the population. Now, there's a quote that always comes back to me whenever I see any sort of population take this step. Those who desire to give up a little freedom in order to gain a little security will not have, nor do they deserve, either one. That comes from Benjamin Franklin. He might know something. So that brings up our next real examination. Our next topic, I guess, would be the next step of this: vaccines and the passport. I'm not talking about a normal passport, the type you get to go from nation to nation, but the passport that you have that says you have been vaccinated. So, what is the vaccine? Well, vaccines typically are either an extremely weakened version of the virus that allows your body to naturally train against it, just like you would work out at a gym. You go to a gym to train your body, or a dead version of the vaccine, that is dead version of the virus that allows your body again to train against it. That way, whenever it comes against the living virus, it's able to defeat it much easier. I love this concept. In fact, I've always loved it ever since I originally was taught it way back when. It was cool. So basically, we're training our bodies in just like we would at the gym in order to defeat this virus. This is cool. We're just using our body's natural immune system in order to fight this off. Unfortunately, this vaccine, the COVID thing, is not an actual vaccine. In fact, it's something completely different. They're trying to pass it off as a vaccine, but it doesn't match any of the known types of vaccines. In fact, it's something extremely experimental that there has not been any long-term human trials of this sort of shot. I don't want to say vaccine because it's really not. They're trying to use it as an umbrella term, and it really isn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be for a very specific type of shot. So now this first comes off with a concept, and I'm surprised. I've seen people who have got this vaccine who continue to wear masks, continue to social distance. What's the point of the vaccine? Because to be honest with you, that makes no sense. Because if this vaccine, again, this shot, is supposed to give you your body's natural immune system and kick into gear and be able to defeat COVID, you shouldn't have to wear masks. Because we know that, according to the CDC, there hasn't been that many reinfected. In fact, last I checked, it was only 50 people worldwide have been reinfected again with COVID, and that is well within the noise margin or the margin of error for the tests. So it's very easy they could have got a false positive out of it. So there's really not been any evidence that you can get COVID again after getting it. Sort of like if you've ever had chickenpox. You don't get chickenpox again after already having it. So that seems to be what COVID is you don't seem to get it. And that would work in the advantage of a vaccine, because, of course, if you have a vaccine that naturally gives your body the immunity instead of actually having COVID, yeah, it works, right? But that's not what they're offering here. So that's not what they're doing. On top of that, now New York's already implemented this. I've not heard an update from them. Maybe they abandoned this because this is just absolute lunacy. but they have decided to go forth with a vaccine passport, which basically means you have to prove that you have been vaccinated in order to leave or come into New York City. I didn't know we were in Soviet Russia. I didn't know I had to carry my papers. That is more scary than anything else. And even when it goes back to the mask mandates, I don't like the mask mandates. I think they're moronic. They weaken the governments as far as their authority goes, because no one's really enforcing them other than a few stores. And even now, it seems that less and less people are enforcing or following it, myself included in that bunch, just because I look at this and saying, wow, there's a lot of side effects and not a lot of benefit, considering I've already had COVID. In fact, there's no benefits for me. If I've already had COVID, vaccines work, and I can't get COVID again. So it would make no sense for me to wear a mask, other than being control or comfort of everyone else. And this is something that really is a red flag for anyone that's listening to a politician. If they, and I don't care what side they're on, I don't care about their affiliation, I don't care what they claim. If they use this phrase, it's a big red flag for the common good. We got to do this for the common good, or any sort of way like that, any sort of phrasing like that. Hitler used it, Mussolini used it, Stalin used it. There's a lot of people throughout history that used it. None of them good people. So they have, anyone that uses that should be a red flag, because anyone that would include themselves as the common can then define and justify any sort of action. So we have seen that phrase definitely used when it comes to wearing masks. We have seen that phrase definitely used when it comes to taking the vaccine and then continuing to wear masks, or trying to wear 2 masks, which that is just insane. Remember all the side effects that I've listed? All the bad things? Yeah, those are literally made worse by wearing 2 masks. Extremely worse. Although I cannot find any, I'll put a disclaimer in here, I did not find any studies and didn't use any studies that showed for 2 masks. No one's done them. But it doesn't take a genius to realize that it's not a good idea. Even if brainwashed Fauci thinks it is. So, the vaccine passport, by what I've seen of this, really is very similar to what we saw implemented a couple of years ago in China, actually. It's a good citizen policy. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, basically, and I think I did do a video on it. If I did not, then I definitely should have. Basically, in China, they implemented this new policy that assigned you a number. And this is your good citizen number. And this good citizen number defines you, literally. Defines what you can do, who you are, and who you can associate with. You see, if you were to violate anything that China decides is not good, such as watching maybe YouTube videos that the government doesn't like, speaking out against some of the extremely cruel policies that China has pursued, your number goes low. And if your number is too low, then you will end up getting blackwalled. Basically, you can't go out of your house eventually. If your number gets too low, you can't access your bank accounts if your number gets too low. And there are many things that can affect this number, such as you being associated with a person with a lower number. So in this way, they have put forth this vaccine passport in, and they use a lot of the same concepts in this vaccine passport in the United States. So, of course, you can say, wow, this is America. They would never settle for this. We would never allow this passport concept that you have to go get all the vaccines in order to go do anything. Except we already have done that. If you have a kid that doesn't get enough of the required vaccines, including STD vaccines, they cannot go to kindergarten. Yes, I said STD vaccines are required to go to kindergarten. Why? Well, they could step on a needle and then get infected. I don't want my kid going to a place that they'd be playing in a playground that someone just shot up in. I think that would be a bit of an issue. And I think that's something the school system should not allow to begin with. So I don't think that should even be in the equation. But yeah, it's kind of required. So it's very easy to see that the COVID vaccine will be required for a kid to go to public school, for your kid to attend college. Some companies have decided to make a requirement in their job to say, hey, if you don't get this COVID vaccine, we're not going to hire you. That's not far outside the realm of possibility. And the more and more we see this happening, and they're putting forth this passport to begin with. They have another thing down the way, which is basically an implant that can be scanned to see what vaccines you have. They claim it's to make sure that you do not get two vaccines, because doctors make mistakes, and in order to make sure that you've got the proper vaccines, they scan it and won't give you any vaccines that you've already got. The problem with that, again, is that it's another step. So if it becomes a requirement they have to have COVID this COVID vaccine in order to go places, it would not be far outside the realm of possibility that then they would be required to have this implant in order to make sure that you have the COVID vaccine. And you're not just lying about it, because you need the papers. And then instead of the papers, in case you leave the papers at home, you have this implant that you could just scan. And it's real quick. I mean, you could just walk up, scan it real quick, and walk on into wherever you're doing. So it's not, it's not that terribly of an inconvenience. You know what that sounds more and more like? Definitely if you're required to have the vaccine before you go to Walmart. Have the vaccine before you go to any store, before you go to any sort of social gathering. I mean, in China, they're implementing this, and you can't leave your house unless you have a green check on your phone. That is your passport. And it says you've had the vaccine and you're good to go. If you don't have that green check, then you can't leave your home. You know what that really sounds like to me, more and more? And I don't like doing this because I already did a video on is COVID the white horse of the apocalypse. And no, it's laughable at best to try to draw that comparison. But when I see what they're putting forth as far as this COVID passport goes, it looks a lot like the mark of the beast. It really does. I hate to say that, because it's always such always makes me sound nuts or something like that. But it really does align a lot and check a lot of the marks. Definitely if they require you to be able to buy and sell, be able to access your bank accounts like the good citizen policy in China. You can access your bank accounts if you don't have the proper vaccines and you're not of a high enough number. And you kind of, so if you associate with someone that has a lower citizen number than yourself, then it affects you, because you could be more likely to spread it for some weird reason, even though you have the vaccine. Which that's not how vaccines work. If you have a vaccine, then you have an immunity to it, and you can't spread it or get it. Unless you're just basically making people have an asymptomatic version of this. In that case, that's even worse. So for what it's worth, as long as this video lasts out there, there are the numbers. There's the actual evaluation of it. Sorry. Getting a bit of a dry throat. We're going to go ahead and do some Q&A. If you guys have any questions, we'll hit that. And then we'll hit. And next week, we'll be back to the normal Bible stuff and Bible studies. But this is just something we needed to hit for however long they allow this on there. I forgot how long. It's been such a long time since I've been here. Haven't been going so far. Hey, welcome. Greetings and blessings, fam. Greetings and blessings to you. Hopefully you're doing well. Oh, I guess a side mention I'll say about our family. We did have one of our relatives pass in the last couple of days. My great uncle passed away. So we have that to deal with this week. He was a good man. Said take off the mask. Yeah. In fact, looking back, that would have been the strategy I would have recommended to begin with, since the very beginning, is for those. In fact, the CDC numbers really do agree to that. If we were to go back to that, I'm going to pull that back up, share the desktop again. There we go. Okay. Looking back at that, really, if you would have said, hey, everyone under the age of 30 or even under the age of 50, if you're retired, stay home. Everyone else, go get over it. These deaths right here are the majority of the deaths down here. I mean, these are the lion's share. And if we could have got everyone under the age of 55 even over this, there wouldn't be much to mention about COVID at all. But I don't think that's what is driving this COVID and the fear that's behind it. It really is an overwhelming fear. In fact, we see that whenever we run into someone who is actually terrified of it. They think and I don't know if this becomes as a side effect of the United States. We're really protected people. We really don't deal with death on a daily basis as many other nations do. I mean, starvation. There are many nations out there that have large parts of their population starve, and we don't have that here to the same extent. There are groups, there are situations that does occur, but again, at a much lower rate than we see outside the United States. So we are really protected, I guess coddled even as young people in this world. So, okay. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this on up. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Sorry. Let's go ahead and end in prayer. Lord, we come before you. We thank you for today. We lift up just the Cobras family, all the things that they're going through. And we lift up my great aunt as she goes through the loss of her husband. We ask for your hand to be upon them, for your peace to be with them. We know that death is not the end. It is just the beginning. We know that death is not something to dread, but a doorway into a much more fulfilling life. So we ask for your hand to be upon us all as we face this future, whatever it may hold. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.